Welcome to the WinEH podcast. This show is focused on empowering ranchers. Whether you're a seasoned rancher or just getting started, we'll guide you on how to use the infinite banking concept as an alternative way to finance your operations. It's a better way to think about money. Join us as we discuss planning for the future, attracting the next generation, and the art of keeping more money within the family. Here's your hosts, Winnie and Lacy.
Hey, so how are you guys doing over there? We are so glad that you are choosing to lean in with us on this next conversation that we are going to have. And it is something that I think is it's going to be hard not to get a little worked up about. And it's really all about, Mary Jo actually brought it up really nicely just in the work that she does on her podcast. But she kind of posed the question, why in the world are we paying for the ranch over and over and over and over again? So this happens because of the vicious cycle that happens with the lending process.
Right.
Right. And it kind of all happens with the ebbs and flows of cash flow management, having to navigate all the different years that were good, but then all the years that were bad. And then there's all these other life events that can possibly prevent, a successful ranch going from generation to generation to generation, or it could go generation to generation to generation, but maybe not profitably. And, I know, Lacy, we were just chatting a little bit about this now, and it's like, what are like the differences, right? You being a rancher's wife, a solid, I don't know how many generations are in over 100 years, right? But it's just like, what is the drastic difference between how it is to deal with someone who has their ranch paid off versus someone who doesn't?
Yeah. So whenever you're talking with someone who has the land paid for, has the livestock paid for, there's so many more options. You're not tied to the bank anymore, the lender anymore, and it produces that level of freedom, I would say. However, we're entering a time, and I think that I've had this conversation quite a bit, where it's getting harder and harder for people who are just getting started in farming or ranching to actually be profitable or get to a place where they can strictly do that, where they're not having to have a job in town or, a second income. And so that's what led us to this topic today, and kind of same as Mary Jo, how many times are we going to pay for the same piece of land within the same family, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, we bring this up today. It's like, I'm sure those of you who are paying for a piece of land right now are, kind of wondering, is this going to take me 40, 50 years to pay off? Because, it's like, it's no different. Like even here in the city, our biggest expense, if those who choose to do it, is a mortgage. That's pretty much always been the biggest bill for any household, right? Or rent, right? So it's like, what kind of difference would it be if you no longer had to do that? And there are different strategies, of course, on how to get there. I mean, the most obvious one that is often talked about or encouraged or seems to make the most sense for a lot of people, because people are becoming a little bit more astute and understand that, if they don't pay down the mortgage quicker, the more interest that they pay.
Right.
Right. So some people do choose to double down, pay weekly, pay bi-weekly for a mortgage payment. So I guess with the infinite banking concept, we quite often will challenge that thought process as a way of getting out of that mortgage. Actually, what may be more optimal is, working towards owning the debt on your house versus constantly paying, quickly paying off your debt with a lender as soon as possible. You can accomplish the same objective, but just in a way where you can keep more money in your pocket and build estate value for yourself at the same time, which is it's like the same objective, same dollar, just doing it better.
Right. Right. Yeah, I recently heard that exact conversation. A couple who were paying double on their mortgage, and it was brought to their attention, hey, that money's leaving you without ever making it work for you first. So why don't you put it in your policy and then take it out to pay the mortgage down? And so now it's working for you forever because it's compounding, but you're still accomplishing your goal of paying down that mortgage sooner, faster than you would if you didn't make those extra payments. So I think it's such an interesting and smart concept or way to think about it, but people just really don't know about it.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think that if you are over there listening and you're thinking, okay, I like the idea, I buy into that thought process, I just want to know how it works with numbers. Like I need to wrap my brain around this in terms of cash flow and see the numbers and how it might work. And so we do have case studies. Like there's case studies in this book, all these books. And so, for you to kind of glean on, I guess, what else comes to mind? Because again, I didn't grow up ranching or anything like that, but how does that, just in your personal experience, Lacy, like just if you think about conversations you've had and its impact?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts around this. And when we're speaking to farmers or ranchers, and we live on the family ranch, and so when you're talking about that generation, let's just say my parents, let's talk about that generation who they are entering into those retirement years or passive income years. And so they're phasing out of the physical work that earns the dollars in the operation. And then the younger generation is coming in. So mom and dad still need to have an income, even though they're in those phasing out years. Because if you're going to town and you're working a 9-to-5 job, maybe you're in the corporate world, you have a pension, whatever it may be. Well, we don't have that with farming and ranching. And so when that next generation, when it's time for them to step up and time for mom and dad to slow down, well, mom and dad still need an income, but we want that family ranch to stay in the family. We don't want mom and dad to have to sell it because the kids want to come in and take it over, or family members, period. And so how can we do this process in a better way where we're not continually paying the bank for the same piece of land? We're not, like, how many times do we want to pay for that piece of land? Let's just pay for it once, and then let's set up a plan that works smarter. Let's work smarter, not harder, to where we're not paying for it again, but we've built up what we need in order for mom and dad to step away with ease and the next generation to come in with ease.
As you were talking about that, what immediately comes to mind is, besides the financial aspect of what has made it difficult, like why it's been a reality that you're paying for the same piece of land over and over and over again, I think what is also a big contributor to it is the estate planning part of it. Really having great communication between the generations, finding and also having really good financial team members that will help you to meet that objective. And we talked about it in some earlier episodes that we had recorded before, and it's like the difference between being able to have the capacity to plan ahead versus just constantly reacting to your finances is such a huge piece to this. I think paying for the same piece of land will less likely happen if there's more proactive financial planning than constantly reacting to your finances. And it happens, I feel, from the conversations and the stories that have been shared in the people that we sit with is that there's so much competing priorities. There's so much life that happens that can really take a person out of really being able to focus on it, right? It's either that, like, so it's like lack of time knowing how to like make it happen and having the right, financial team members cheering you on to say like, this is possible, you can do this. And sometimes it's also just like anything else. I think any lawyer will tell you it is easier just to sit down with a person and gather all the questions that are required to complete the first draft of a will than it is to send a questionnaire to clients to complete the will. Because talking about legacy planning hasn't been seen in the past as like, hey, let's just like jump up out of our chairs and like make sure we get like, let's just do this. Like, let's just get it done. Let's just book like every single weekend for the next like, 10 weeks. And like, let's just get her done because, I'm excited for that to happen. It's like, no, everyone's like, most of the time people are like in avoidance or there's like a lot of, mental pain and anguish surrounding the whole thing. So I'd love, Lacy, for us to kind of continue cheering people on and having empowering conversations that, the harder stuff that you work through, it's possible to get through the other side of having a result such as not having to pay for the same piece of land so many times, like.
Yeah, totally. And I think like these conversations are hard for people. And I think another contributing factor to is the common theme of like, well, everybody else experiences this pain point too of like, okay, it's time for the next generation. We have to phase out. Everybody else goes through this too. Well, the kids will just, take out a mortgage, they'll pay us. And maybe it's just seen as there's no other option. And we're here to say like, look, there are other options. Let's explore them. It may not be an easy conversation that gives you the warm fuzzies because let's face it, we start to talk about, okay, when someone passes away, when we, when we're no longer here on this earth, those aren't easy conversations to have. But if we have them now, it makes when that time comes, when mom and dad, whoever it is, when they're phasing out, next generation stepping in, when somebody passes away, it makes that event easier if we have those hard conversations now and we get something put in place now. It's just setting us up to be able to be more present when life happens, because we're all going to go somewhere at some point. We're not going to live forever. And so how can we best set ourselves up so that we can be 100% present in those moments with the least amount of financial stress? That gets me all up in my feels for that, because that's what I want to see for every single client that comes to us.
So, I mean, this whole conversation started off with, how is it and why is it that we are paying for the same piece of land repeatedly? And look at where our conversation ended up.
Now we're talking about dying.
God. Goodness. So, I also feel like the reason why it also keeps happening too, and we're talking about, like just have the conversation. And yet at the same time, there may be some real reactions coming out of like, well, honestly, it's the people that they have to have the conversation with. And not everyone is good at confronting, because you have to talk about the hard stuff. So it means like you got to confront something that, you might feel might piss someone you love off, or you might, like it's the fear of someone getting mad at you that I think scares most people away from sometimes bringing up what needs to be brought up.
Yeah.
And so Thomas Deans wrote a book called Willing Wisdom, which we offer here, like, I sell here through our office or whatever. And it's a great book that really helps inspire. Like I've had really good reactions from it. Like when you're reading the book, it's really an inspiring book. Like you don't think that, hey, I'm going to get ready to do a will. But somehow there's some of the things that Dr. Thomas William Deans shares in that book that really inspires families to start taking first steps around having the more difficult conversations. So, but I think it starts with each and every one of us to make a choice that it's important.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you want the legacy of keeping the ranch in the family and you want to leave it better than it was left for you, and you want to make it so that it's always the same thing. As parents, we want to make sure that we're leaving it a better setup for our kids so that they don't struggle as hard as we did. And so we're saying that the infinite banking concept and using this as a way of really helping you to get to that place so that your family can keep more money in the family so that it can do more together and it's just like that's why they call it the infinite banking concept, because the possibilities are just infinite.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, the possibilities are infinite. That's right. So we started off with how many times we're going to pay for that same piece of land to let's leave a legacy. I mean, the possibilities are infinite, and having those hard conversations, we encourage you to have the courage to have those conversations, because they're easier to have now than they are when you're forced to have them. So hit the subscribe button, lean in with us and listen to us every week. If you could share this podcast with people, we would be ever so grateful. Head over to our website, rancherway.com. Everything that we just talked about, there's case studies in these two books. Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, and the new Canadian version of Farming Without the Bank. So they're going to answer some questions you have, and then reach out to us. We would love to chat with you about this conversation.
So glad you leaned in with us on the WinEH podcast. We truly hope you're feeling more informed and empowered to take another step towards optimizing your financial life. Right now, make sure you hit subscribe so you can keep growing and learning with us. Until next time, we wish you prosperity in every area of your life.